Thank you for joining me today. My name is Joe, and I am with ERWP, or the Elbow River Watershed Partnership. Before we get started, I'd just like you to take a second to consider how you enjoy connecting to the river. Maybe you like going fishing, or maybe you enjoy kayaking and rafting. Maybe you and your family like to visit these really beautiful spaces together. There are so many different ways to enjoy a river and the green spaces that are within the Elbow River Watershed. I'd also like to acknowledge that the Elbow River Watershed is within Treaty 7 territory, which is the ancestral home of the Blackfoot Confederacy, including the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai. It's also home to the Tsuut'ina Nation and the Iahe Nakota, and is within Métis Region 3. These communities are the original stewards of these amazing landscapes, and they have been protecting water quality since time immemorial. When we think of a river, we often think of the surface water, what we can see. But it's also important to consider how decision on the landscape can impact the water and how riparian areas are vital in maintaining water quality and quantity. Today we're going to explore different ways that we can protect our drinking water. First, I'll give you a better understanding of ERWP and the work that we do. Then we'll spend some time reviewing riparian areas and their impact on water. We'll look at the health of riparian areas within the Elbow River watershed and explore how they impact water quality and quantity. The Elbow River Watershed Partnership is a non-profit, non-governmental watershed stewardship group. Our goal is to promote a healthy watershed, and partnerships are integral to achieving that goal. We incorporate local knowledge and scientific expertise to promote watershed management improvement through collaborative, targeted, and cost-effective actions by citizens and stakeholders. ERWP success is built upon the knowledge, expertise, and passion of its members and stakeholders within the Elbow watershed. In order to achieve our goal, we work with numerous organizations and run a variety of programs. We offer a field study for grade 8 and 9 science classes. Students spend the day outside along the Elbow River and perform a number of scientific tests to learn more about water quality. We explore how different land uses like agriculture, recreation, industry, and municipalities within the Elbow River watershed may impact the landscape, and what best industry practices are implemented to maintain the quality of water. One of the things we try to highlight to students is that we are so close to the headwaters, where the river begins. We have access to some of the cleanest drinking water in the world, so how can we ensure it stays that way? In 2020, we were unable to offer in-person programs, so the field study was adapted and turned into an interactive video. Students followed the Elbow River's journey with their water workbook. They met industry experts and made predictions about the health of the river. In the spring of 2021, our virtual field study was able to connect about 60 classrooms and over 1,500 students to the Elbow River watershed. We've also worked with partners on numerous restoration projects. For example, we've partnered with Alberta Environment and Parks, Trout Unlimited, Cows and Fish, university students, and trail users to prevent erosion, improve habitats, enhance riparian areas, and reduce cattle and off-highway vehicle access to creeks in McLean Creek Public Land Use Zone. A mix of willow staking, woody debris structures, and cattle fencing was used. After a couple years of growth, many of the exposed banks are now densely covered with willows and grasses. We're seeing increased bank stability, which helps prevent erosion, and increased vegetation cover, which is critical for native species of fish like West Slope cutthroat trout. Lastly, we collect and share data. We have now completed an Elbow River State of the Watershed report and are sharing some of our findings in this presentation. A State of the Watershed report is a snapshot of the health of the watershed. Some data is current up to 2018 and some up to 2020, depending on when the chapter was written and what data was available. What is a watershed? I've used this term a lot, so I just want to make sure we all have the same understanding. This is how it's explained to students in our freshwater field study program. A watershed is not just bodies of water. We want to consider the entire area of land that collects and drains water. We like to use our hands as a mini watershed model. If you cup your hands and I pour water into them, where is that water going to go? It will drain to the lowest point. Now, let's say there's some mustard on your hands from your lunch, and if I dump water on your hands, that water could pick up that mustard and carry it to the lowest point as well. When it rains or when snow melts, water can touch the entire landscape. It is also the greatest solvent, so it could potentially pick up nutrients or contaminants on the landscape and carry them to the larger bodies of water. Watersheds are connected. Large watershed areas are made up of numerous smaller watersheds. Small tributaries like McLean or Sylvester Creek are part of the larger Elbow River watershed. The Elbow River eventually flows into the Bow, so it exists within the larger Bow River watershed, which exists within the larger South Saskatchewan watershed. This means that land impacts within smaller watershed areas potentially impact the water quality of our larger bodies of water. In our freshwater field study, we like to use the phrase, "the river is an expression of the landscape." All land impacts within the watershed have the potential to impact water quality and quantity. One of the best ways to protect water is to promote and improve riparian areas. Riparian areas are the lush green spaces that border bodies of water. If you look at the image of Canyon Creek, it's easy to imagine that the area that borders the river is also saturated with water like a sponge. A healthy riparian zone has few altered banks. Instead of eroding, the bank acts like a sponge and holds water. This buffer protects us from floods during seasonal high waters and acts as a reservoir when it's dry. Water-loving plant species, like willow and sedges, improve water quality by absorbing and filtering water with their roots. Deep-rooted trees hold on to sediment and prevent the banks from eroding. They also provide cover or protection for plants and wildlife, like fish and birds. This is one of my favorite flowers that's found along the Elbow Lake. See if you can figure out why they're called little elephants, or elephant heads. These tiny flowers thrive in riparian areas. They grow right next to the water. I know I said riparian areas act like a sponge, but when you snap a photo of little elephants, the ground you stand on will actually feel like a sponge, and your shoes may get a little wet. This is just one example of the numerous water-loving plants and animals that depend on riparian areas for survival. Chapters 10 and 11 of the Elbow River State of the Watershed report catalog numerous plant and animal species that benefit from a healthy Elbow River watershed. Riparian areas are like jigsaw puzzles. Each component is critical to the success of the entire system. When all the pieces are intact, riparian areas are resilient and provide us with many benefits. They trap sediment, which helps hold and store water. Sediment can carry contaminants and nutrients, so trapping it improves water quality and creates nutrient-rich soil. It reduces the velocity of the water, which slows erosion and increases bank stability. This can lead to a higher water level, which extends the width of the riparian area, protecting water quantity. They store high volumes of water during floods, which reduces flood damage. This stored water is then slowly released over time and is especially important in dry periods. Storing water can reduce the amount of contaminants and nutrients that reach the water. An increase in riparian plants that absorb and filter with their roots improves water quality. Increased vegetation creates and maintains habitats for fish, wildlife, invertebrates, and plants, improving the overall biodiversity. If land use activities negatively impact or remove these pieces, the overall health of the riparian area is compromised, and we lose important ecological functions like wildlife habitat and stormwater filtration. Allowing these natural processes to occur protects our drinking water and protects us from the impacts of flood and drought. It is important to acknowledge that the Elbow River naturally changes over time, or it can shift quite suddenly, such as during a spring freshet. Despite our best efforts to manage the river, it may change course. Between 2000 and 2010, data was collected from 108 sites along the Elbow River to assess riparian health. In the upper reaches, which are primarily within protected areas like Kananaskis Country, riparian areas were rated as healthy. Riparian health is most heavily impacted in the lowest urbanized reaches. Growing municipalities, berms, bank armoring, and impacts of recreational use negatively affect riparian health. Provincial guidelines help developers and land managers ensure aquatic ecosystems are protected when developing near bodies of water. Stepping back from the water acknowledges that municipalities play a key role in the management of aquatic ecosystem and emphasizes the importance of conserving riparian areas. Some of the factors considered include risk of groundwater contamination, flood hazards, shoreline migration, and the impact of slope. More information on stepping back from the water can be found at aep.alberta.ca. A healthy riparian area can prevent stream channel incisement. This occurs when erosion carves the bank and the channel bed lowers within the floodplain. During seasonal high water events, it is more difficult for the water to escape the banks and recharge groundwater. High water and periodic flood events are important to disperse moisture throughout the riparian area and irrigate riparian vegetation. When floodwaters can escape the banks, erosion within the channel is reduced and spreads the energy over a larger area. The water slows down and deposits sediment along the floodplain, which enriches the soil and creates new areas for plants to establish themselves. Along the Elbow River, high water events are able to periodically access the highest terraces of the floodplain and tributaries, and so therefore it's considered stable and not incised. Looking at the image of bank incisement at McLean Creek, it may not seem like the bank is in disrepair. But depending on the environment, it can take up to 500 to 1,000 years for 1 inch of topsoil to be formed. Once a stream channel has become incised, the recovery process may take a very long time to recover naturally. Areas that are accessible to land users may require planting vegetation and sediment trapping to rebuild the floodplain. Implementing riparian management practices has numerous benefits for both the landscape and for us. Floods and drought are natural and periodic. Healthy riparian areas are our natural insurance policy and can minimize the extent of damage. While floods can be devastating to infrastructure, they play an important role on the landscape and recharge groundwater, which acts as a reservoir and provides us with water in drier periods. We can benefit from these natural processes if we conserve intact riparian floodplains and avoid further loss of riparian habitat. It can take decades for a landscape to recover from damage. Implementing restoration projects like willow staking can repair damage from land use activities and promotes a natural recovery process. Increasing the width of riparian buffers protects habitat, slows down water, and prevents erosion, while sustaining good water quality and conserving water quantity. When it comes to land management, it is important to take into consideration that we are always in a watershed. In our freshwater field study, we explained to students that the river is an expression of the landscape. Agricultural practices, residential developments, and urban expansion can lead to habitat loss, vegetation clearing, and increased human access to water bodies. Typically, the landscape absorbs and slows down surface water runoff, but trails, roads, and bank armoring channels and speeds the runoff up, which can contribute to erosion. An increase in paved areas contributes to increased runoff, which can then overburden the absorption and filtration abilities of riparian areas. This may negatively impact groundwater quantity, surface water quality, bank stability, and fish and wildlife habitat. Bioengineering can be used to improve riparian health. Using wood, plants, and soil instead of large riprap incorporates natural materials to provide stabilization and improves buffering and filtering functions. Beavers are riparian area engineers, so finding ways to coexist with them, such as implementing tree wrappings or culvert protective fences, can increase the size and improve the health of riparian areas. We know riparian areas are vital to groundwater and surface water health. By giving them space and limiting our impact, we can reap the benefits of these ecosystems and hopefully minimize the effects of flood and drought. Over 500,000 people rely and personally benefit from a healthy Elbow River watershed. There are numerous land impacts that have the potential to impact water quality, so partnerships are vital to ensuring communities within the watershed have access to clean drinking waters. Measures should be taken to improve the health of the watershed, and these actions should be proactive, not reactive. One of the main objectives of the freshwater field study is to get students thinking about how decisions on the landscape, at home or in their school, might impact the water we all rely on. When we think about the river, it's important to remember those lush green spaces or filter strips that are connected to them. A healthy riparian area improves the health of the river and protects our drinking water. Thank you so much for your time today. My hope is that you have a better understanding of the role riparian areas play, and you feel a stronger sense of connection to our drinking water. We know how land impacts may disturb the natural processes of the river, which is vital to maintaining a healthy watershed and ensuring future generations have access to the same water quality. I'd like to say a big thank you to everyone who helped us with the Elbow River State of the Watershed Report. Thank you to our project sponsors, Alberta Eco Trust, the Bow River Basin Council, Calgary Foundation, ERWP Casino Volunteers, United Nations Association in Canada, Green Spaces Program, Land Stewardship Centre, Watershed Stewardship Grant Program, Rocky View County, and the City of Calgary Water Resources. And also many thanks to the 84 contributors to the report. If you have any questions, please reach out to us at coordinator@erwp.org or check out erwp.org for more information and to find the complete Elbow River State of the Watershed Report.